Hello, everyone. Good evening again to those of you joining us from Singapore. My name is Carmen Pang, and I am the co-founder and co-director of SWAG, Singapore Wildcat Action Group. And it's so good to see everyone on day 4 of Singapore Tiger Week 2021. For those who are just joining us today, SWAG organizes the annual Singapore Tiger Week to provide a platform for tiger conservationists from around the world to get together and share their knowledge and have discussions with each other, and as well as with the public. And while this year's platform is a virtual one, but thanks to Zoom, we managed to gather way more speakers than the previous Singapore Tiger Week, and that's 19 to be exact. And these 19 speakers are joining us from 10 different countries and various time zones, including this evening's speakers. And in the first 3 days of the conference, we heard from speakers in Southeast Asia who told us about the projects they lead to counter the alarming threat of poaching in our neighboring countries. But today, we are going to move on to track 2 of the program, which is tiger conservation in North, Central, and South Asia. In a moment, Dr. Vilma Di Rosario, my partner in crime, SWAG co-founder and co-director, will tell you more about today's presentations and introduce our speakers to you. But before we proceed, I need to take care, as usual, of a few housekeeping items. First, all Singapore Tiger Week sessions will be recorded, and the recordings will be available in the SWAG YouTube channel after Singapore Tiger Week concludes. So if you go to our website, which is swagcat.org, you'll find links to all our social media channels, including our YouTube channel. Secondly, to minimize distraction, may we ask you to mute your microphone during the presentations and use the chat function to ask any questions you have for our speakers. We'll be monitoring the chat, and we will try to get to as many questions as possible during the Q&A segment after all the presentations. And lastly, we'd like to take a Wi-Fi with everyone. So for those of you who would like to be in the group photo, could you please turn on your cameras briefly right now? And Daphne will be helping us to take the screenshots. So Daphne, let us know whenever you need us to smile.
Yeah, sure.
Please turn on your videos. If not, we have just a few with faces. Yeah. Thank you.
All right. So yeah, I have 3 pages here. So I'll take the first page. Everyone on the first page, give me a smile. 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay, let me see if this turns out. Good. Okay, page 2. Videos on. 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay. Page 2 is good. And page 3. 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay. Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Daphne. Now that that's completed, now we're done, let's move on to the main event. And Vilma, I'll let you introduce our speakers.
Thank you, Carmen. Daphne, could we have that wonderful map of yours and Ariana's? Thank you. Okay, yeah, we realized that sometimes our audience might not know where the countries are, although maybe most of you do. But today we're so pleased and honored to have a speaker from India, Dr. Raghu Chundawat, a speaker from Nepal, Dr. Kanchat Thapa, and a speaker from Bhutan, Mr. Kuenley Tenzin. Thank you very much to the 3 of you who'll be talking about tiger conservation in your own country. Could I have the next slide, please? Okay, so Dr. Raghu will be talking about wild tigers in India and the lessons learned. And Dr. Kanchat will talk about tiger conservation in the foothills of the Himalayas. And Mr. Kuenley Tenzin will talk about the importance of landscape connectivity for tiger conservation. Without further ado, we'd like to introduce Dr. Raghu Chundawat. Yes, Dr. Raghu is no stranger to us. He was a speaker at the inaugural Singapore Tiger Week in 2019. So we are very pleased and happy to have Dr. Chundawat back again. Dr. Chundawat is a conservation biologist renowned for his long-term study of the Bengal tiger at Panna National Park or Panna Tiger Reserve, which is in Madhya Pradesh in the central part of India. His study, his long-term study, is the subject of his book, The Rise and Fall of the Emerald Tigers. And 2 years ago, we got to see the movie, which was really beautiful. For the last 10 years, Dr. Raghu has been active in wildlife tourism research. Currently, he and his wife, Joanna, who is on this call as well, run a lodge called the Sarai at Toria, close to the World Heritage Site of Khajuraho and Panna Tiger Reserve. His work now focuses on creating tiger-friendly communities in the neighborhoods around Panna Tiger Reserve. We are pleased to introduce Dr. Raghu. Dr. Raghu, please make your presentation.
Thank you. Properly, and you can see the presentation.
Yes, we can see very well, and we can hear you too.
Okay. Okay. What I have done is that the topic we earlier agreed was the tiger conservation in India and lesson learned, and I have added a little bit. Other thing is the road ahead, because there are too many lessons, and I don't think in 20 minutes of time I can talk about all of them. So I will be using a few things, and then how they're useful and how what's the future looks like for tigers and what needs to be done. So I will be looking at this few lessons that we have learned and about how to go about the tiger conservation in future in India. So wildlife conservation in India is full of fantastic success stories. You will be amazed at how many success stories we have in India. But as you all know, India is full of contradictions. So you have good thing happening, but we have bad thing happening, and it's wildlife and tiger conservation is no exception in this term. And unfortunately, failures do overshadow our success stories, even though we have fantastic. If you look at in the world where the biggest success stories are happening, India is quite high up in there. So there's a lot of success stories, but we have enough share of failures too, and that kinds of overshadow success stories in India. So what are the success stories? If you look at snow leopard is one of them. If you want to see snow leopard in India, it's one of the place to go. And my favorite stories I always talk about is Ladakh oriole. It is an endemic species. The only population found in the world is in mostly in India, in the mountain regions of Ladakh and Kargil, and a little bit of in Pakistan area. And when we were working in 80s, we thought this species may not survive. There were maybe a few hundred individuals left, and population was declining very fast. But in 90s, the steps were taken mainly to stop poaching and some of the other actions which was taken by the local staff there. The population really recovered. Now we're talking about several thousand of these individuals. So not only we could stall the decline, but recovery was fantastic. And I think that's really a big achievement. Then you have rhinos, where we started with maybe less than 100 to now several thousand of them. Lions, same, less than 20 to now we are talking about 600, 700. Is spreading out in much larger landscapes. We have leopards almost every part of the world, of every part of the in Indian landscape. even as close as Mumbai, which is one of the largest metros. Red panda recoveries is fantastic. Ambur falcon is a story. It's 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 so exciting that with if you go with the community and work with it, you can really turn it around very quickly. Silent Valley is a very old example. Gharial, not many people know. The first conservation project in India started was not Project Tiger or Project Elephant or Project Snow Leopard. It was about the crocodiles and gharials. What we have now is because of that project started in early 70s, I think, or maybe late 60s. And that's is amazing work that was done in 2 decades, in 70s and 80s. That's why we have crocodile numbers in our rivers, in our um, wetlands, and especially the gharial. Swamp deer, there are so many, but my favorite is a story about Pygmy Hawk. Very few individuals were left. Um, there was a then desperate need to have an XC2 breeding centers and then reintroduce. And what the India is able to do is quite fascinating. They have now introduced more than 100 individuals in the populations. And if you look at the amount of money that is invested in it, and the kind of success they've got with limited facilities, it's I think no country can match that. It's quite something. It is worth learning and knowing about this project, how it's been done and how successful it's been. But today we will be talking about the tiger, and I was fortunate enough to spend some time and got an opportunity to study tigers in dry forest for about 10 years, and and gives me some idea about tiger conservation. Um, uh, it has seen almost about 4 decades of very intensive conservation and management of its habitat. The conservation program started in early 70s. In late 60s, hunting was banned, but the conservation started about 1972 when Project Tigers was launched. 8 or 9 areas were set aside for tigers, and then now we have 50 tiger reserves where intensive work has gone on. But we have done quite considerably in some areas, not in all the areas. But tiger is still not out of troubled waters in India. We still a lot more to be done. The problem, or you can say the benefit, is that the most of the tiger habitat is managed by one agency, which is the Forest Department, and the entire tiger conservation is dependent on one conservation model where we have decided the tiger needs space. We provided the space in form of protected areas. When we did this, we didn't have much information as far as what is the space, how much space is needed for tigers in different habitats. So based on some guesswork, some protected areas were created, space was set aside for tigers, Project Tiger was launched, and very intensive conservation was done. And these red dots are all protected areas in India. It has played a very vital role. It's been very successful program. Um, and but the only issue is that the conservation, whatever has been achieved, is limited within the boundaries of these protected areas. So you have all isolated centers of conservation all over India, where we are working very intensively. The other thing is that the conservation success is not uniform in all these areas. Some areas have done very well, some has not worked, and some are doing very gradual. Changes are very gradual, very slow, and some still be not able to halt the decline in terms of the habitat quality, in terms of the wildlife population, the species that we were targeting in that area. So there is a lot of scope to do conservation in these areas. So let's look at the model which we are following, which is protected area model, where we believe that these wildlife and biodiversity need an environed spaces, and we have provided that. But the issues it cannot deal with, the conservation issues is can't, the protected areas can't handle that. That model is limited in addressing these issues. Some of the issues is range restrictions. So the tiger now occupies only 7% of the range. If you want to increase the range, it is limited to within the protected area boundary. How can you ensure tigers to go back? And the range restriction or decline in range is one of the first early sign of extinction of a species. So if you want to remove that threat, you need to reverse this trend, and that protected area may not help much. The population, if you look at it, they are surviving in fragmented habitat, isolation. The protected area create very isolated population. Connectivity is very poor between these fragmented population, and protected areas can't do that, because if you want to connect them, you have to work outside the boundaries of the protected area to make the connectivity. So the protected area is limited in providing connectivity. The protected area, as I said, we didn't have information what would be the space needed, or what would be the viable, demographically viable population sizes we need to protect in our protected area. So the most of the protected areas we have created, they are not large enough to protect a viable tiger population. And then again, because you have this problem of the size, then protected area cannot, if it cannot protect a viable population, it cannot, it's limited in that scope. Loss of habitat and habitat quality of tiger habitat I'm talking about. And so within the protected area is fine, but outside the protected areas, it's it's in decline. It's slow in last few decades, but it's happening. The protected areas again can't address that issue. Genetics is another one. Biotic pressures is again a pressure, because it's all outside the protected areas. How are you going to deal with it? Tourism is another issue, that protected area. Inside the protected area you can deal with. Outside, how will you do it? Whether we can use it as a conservation tool or not, that's another issue. The protected area based conservation model has limitations. And then the community support, the community's participation. We in the protected area model, because we have created an exclusive model, we have removed the community's dependence and or community that resided inside to outside. And so the benefit of conservation is not transferring to these communities which live at the periphery, or were dependent on these resources. So these are some of the, and these are very crucial, critical issues for tiger conservation or biodiversity conservation or any species conservation. And the model which we are looking at is, which is a protected area, cannot address these issues. So we need a different approach outside these boundaries. We're not saying that it's not a good model. It has been very successful. It has worked. It has not worked very uniformly, but we can work on that. But in simultaneously, where it has worked, we need to work around those areas to make provide this strength to those conservation centers. Where are we now after 4 years of conservation? Now, one of the things is, generally it is assessed with the numbers, and numbers creates kind of a it can be used to put forward a different perception, a very friendly perception. And there it is usually done by shifting the baselines, and I will call them as a shift um, syndrome of shifting conservation baseline. So at the turn of the century, I don't know who, but somehow in the literature come up how it came up, but it was written somewhere that there were about 40,000 tigers at the turn of the century, and that was a conservation baseline. So when our second assessment was done in late 68, 69, in India, it was believed that we have left 2,500. So from 40,000 to 2,500, it was a shocker for the world, and it shook the entire conservation community. And the Project Tiger was launched, and it carried on. Project areas were created, but then a new set of more scientific assessment was done in 2006. The numbers, their assessment was 1,400. Now the conservation baseline from 2,500 to 1,400 became the new conservation baseline. So every generation is seeing a new conservation baseline, and it's not a good thing, because it can create a different perception. And then the recent, after 15 years, in 2018, assessment said we have almost 3,000 tigers. Now, all of a sudden, the politics around this tiger conservation sees as a good opportunity and use this 1400 as a new conservation baseline. And we're talking about doubling the numbers. We have achieved our targets and things like that. And just basically to create a more friendly perception. But if you look at it, 2,500 tigers at the beginning of the tiger conservation very far ahead. So if you look at 2,500 as a baseline, if you look at 1,400 as a baseline, you get different perception. And that's what something is happening in India. When these figures were released by our Prime Minister, he referred to it as Bago mein bahar hai. Bago means they are parklands. Parks are so the parks are blooming. That's what basically he was saying with tigers. And then it created a perception, and the second perception it created was that we have achieved the target. In fact, the people have gone ahead. Some of the conservationists have said that India has done what it needed to do for tiger conservation, and there is no space left for tigers in India. So what we have, this is what we can achieve, and we can't go anymore. And these are so how the conservation baseline shifts with generations. The perception about our work, what we have done, shifts also, and it takes away focus or things which we can do, or things what we have done, or how to go about it. So if you think a generation thinks that India can only hold 3,000 tigers, then the progress in reversing the trend of the range of the tiger decline will we will not be able to deal with. Connectivity, we will have problems. We will how to do conservation outside protected areas. Our protected areas become more isolated if we believe in these perceptions. So we need to look at these conservation baselines very, very critically, and not uh, get diverted by these kind of perception in media is being created. Tiger is barely hanging on to 7% of the zone range, and not even all the protected area. Tiger occupy all the protected areas. So the first step is, if you want to reverse the declining trend, first work would be to start with our protected areas. So every protected area which is in tiger habitat should have presence of tigers. That's maybe the first target India should have. Then we work out on the outside protected areas, how we can do that. So what are the biggest achievement in tiger conservation? Generally, if you look at media, literature, and you will find that numbers are generally discussed, because number is used as a proxy of success or failure of conservation. So if you look at the numbers, then 2,500, where we begin in the early 70s to after 4 decades, we have not achieved much. But I think India has done very well. The biggest success of it is not the numbers, but it is the geography it is able to hold. So tiger was present in different geographical region of India, different habitat types. Tiger still occupy all the habitats it had occupied. So these light green is the tiger distribution in India. It is very fragmented. It is in small populations, but it still occupies all the habitats. It occupies all the geographies in India, and that's the biggest success of India. If you want to work on this and want to reverse the trend, it is still possible. If you go to each dot and let's work outside these protected areas and mushrooming, look at the mushroom growth, and you can work. There is a potential that we can connect these distributions or tiger presence, and also the larger population who can survive. It's not an easy task to do it outside our protected areas. It's dominated by human conflict. It's riddled with conflict. We have to work hard, but there are ways we can do. The existing conservation model will not help. us much. What is the biggest failures? Again, it's not the numbers for me. The biggest failures are that India has achieved some significant successes in some of the protected areas, and we have not taken advantage of our success stories. The success is how to take the conservation a step or two step ahead where we have achieved successes. We should, and unfortunately, we now have a perception generally been talked about that India has done well. It is promised double the tiger numbers, which he says it has done, which for I believe it's not, but it's that there is a perception and India don't have a space. Then that's a failure as far as I'm concerned to take advantage of our success stories. We have different kinds of success stories. We take advantage of those and take conservation a notch up. Conservation based on protected model is an exclusive model where we removed is the easiest way of doing conservation, where we removed it's it's as simple as like fencing an area or creating a safari park, but it's not because we have not fenced it. It's not an easy job. We're looking at a larger scale, but it's a very exclusive conservation model where we have removed all the threats um, and provided a very friendly environment for tigers and within the boundaries. It's been very successful. As I said, it's limited. It cannot reverse the range restriction. Um, do not have a conservation reach beyond its boundaries, and we with this model we cannot take advantage of our successes because if we have to take advantage we have to go outside the boundaries, and this model doesn't provide that. Outside protected areas we will need an alternative conservation model, a model that is inclusive, because if people and wildlife has to live together, we cannot remove villages from there, we cannot remove wildlife from there. So it has to be an inclusive conservation model, and as a model has to be run in parallel and in complement to the existing model of protected areas. So we have to create these models uh, for strengthening our success stories which we have created. What is the potential for India to target? So if you're going forward, then what needs to be the target? Currently, if you look at the amount of tiger habitat we have in India, um, very realistically, we can think of about having 5,000 to 6,000 tigers. Not all the protected areas, not all the sanctuary wildlife sanctuaries which are in tiger habitat have tigers or tigers are doing well. If we can think that all the protected areas are have equal amount of success, we can very easily have maybe 4 to 5,000 tigers and another 1,500 outside protected areas, so that connectivity is maintained and things like that. Then we're talking about 6, 7,000 tigers, very realistically possible in next 10 years. Not a great deal, but it is possible. But we need a different approach, different model to do that. So it's what is the difference between these two models? This very one major thing. So the protected area model looks at tiger needs forest, and we have provided that forest in form of space or protected areas. Whereas the new inclusive model will look at to that forest needs tigers. If you want to protect the forest, we want to protect the corridors. We need tigers to be there. No point doing without tigers. So because we believe that tiger does add value to the tiger habitat, and that value can provide an incentives to the communities that reside in it, and then participate actively in the tiger conservation. And I have discussed this in quite detail about my philosophy, my approach, about the based on my 10 years research in tigers in the book. Wilma has just mentioned about it. If anybody interested, look for this. There is uh, quite detailed description is there about the problems of tiger conservation and how we can go about it. One of the major problems going ahead with the existing model is a scale mismatch. My research suggests that what we have a problem is that, especially in dry forest, is that these the protected areas we have created are not large enough, and the need for the size protected area, the space is different in different habitat. If you look at it, 450 square kilometer protected areas, if we have tigers in it, there is a almost less than 10% chance of extinction in Tarai forest. If you go in rainforest areas or moist deciduous forest areas, same size of protected area will have about 15%, between 10 to 15% of chances of extinction. But if you go to a deciduous forest, moist deciduous forest, then it goes up drastically. Then you have almost more than 40% chances of extinction. If you go to dry forest, then it's even bigger. And we are, this is a 100-year-old data, which based on that we have created this model, and we looked at it. And then if you look at the recent extinction that happened in Panna or in Sariska, within the protected area, within the tiger reserve, where we provided the best environment for tigers, and we've lost tigers from there. It was in these dry forests. So, and dry forest, unfortunately, is the largest tiger habitat in India. It's about almost 50% of the tiger habitat is in this habitat. So if we're going to lose tigers here, and we're losing tigers at much faster rate in this habitat than in any other habitat, and so we need to protect tigers in these areas. And the space, if you look at the average size of protected areas in this dry forest, is about around here, about 350 square kilometers. The size which we are providing and size needed for tigers is much larger, and what we're providing is a smaller, and I call it as a scale mismatch. And a scale mismatch is a serious problem. The problem that happens is that your breeding population living in both the places, inside the protected areas and outside the protected areas. And it's surviving in two different motility regimes. When you have once inside the protected area, it is protected. When the same breeding female is outside protected areas, all of a sudden the motility factors impacts her survival probabilities. So overall, the population's survival chances declines because we have this smaller protected areas. And I think that cannot be addressed by protected areas, because we can't increase the protected areas now in this in 21st century. So what we need to do is another way of doing conservation outside our protected areas. So whatever is being protected is strengthened, because we have done enough, good enough work in these protected areas. And these are the areas where we need to generate goodwill within the community to participate, to have tigers in their neighborhood. And generally, people see having tigers, having elephants in a conflicting environment. So if you look at it, where are the good practices which minimizes a traditional, I'm talking about the traditionally good practices that minimize conflict? You will find these only in areas where tiger is continuously present, because there was a need to continue with those good practices. So it survived. But in areas where tiger was present, the good practices were there, but then we lost tigers there for many various reasons. Now, if we do conservation and tigers comes back because of our success stories in our conservation centers or protected areas, now a generation is lived without the tigers for maybe a couple of decades. They have lost those. There was no need of these good practices, so they have now different way of lifestyle, different traditions, different way of living, have no idea how to live on those in conflicting environment. And when tiger appears, the conflict is heightened. It sometimes manifests in very violent reactions to the tigers. So I have seen this in my time when I was doing research, because in the protected areas we had villages, and when I was interviewing some of the old people, maybe about 70 years old guy, he had not seen tigers, and I was surprised. You live tigers all over the place. He said, I have heard tigers, but I have not seen tigers. I said, why? He said, if I know there is a tiger, I will not go there. I will go the other way. Why should I go there? I will take a different path. But imagine a generation which has not lived with the tiger. If we come to know the tiger is there, the first thing is to go and see the tiger. So that kind of changes that takes place. So we need tiger there. If tiger has to survive with human tiger presence, with human is extremely important. Now we have to find a ways how we can have those good practices. We can't go back to the old traditional practices and try to use them in the generation which is now very modern, will live very differently. We have to find contemporary solutions to and create new uh, practices. And you see these things uh, in India happening, where people are using technology to minimize these conflict areas. We have guards, village have guards, warning systems and things like that. And there are various ways one can do it. By economic incentives also one can do it, but there are ways we can, but it is a must thing to do. The other thing which for me is doesn't work is the core and buffer concept. If you have a vulnerable core, then why have a porous buffer? If you're looking at egg, if you have a vulnerable core, you need a, a hard core, a hard buffer. So the buffer, I would like a smaller buffer, a narrower buffer, but better protected than our core areas. Um, because if you don't do it, if you created buffer which is porous, you have a higher mortality regime in these areas, and if the breeding tiger comes out in this area and get killed, you're creating a situation what we call in science ecological trap. So you doing conservation here, creating a friendly environment for tigers to come out and get killed, then you are driving your protected population outside your protected areas and getting killed. That is something we need to be very careful of. It's all not all the buffers are ecological traps. And in certain situation it can turn into, and when it turns into, you have a problem. And Panna was one prime example why we have lost tigers in Panna despite well protected. Because you can protect within the boundaries or at the boundaries, but the tigers can go through the boundary and get killed outside. Then you have a problem.
Dr. Raghu, you
Yeah.
have about 5 minutes left.
Okay, I will try to be very quick. Thank you, Vilma. So, what are the priorities if you're going forward? And for me, uh, working outside our protected areas, um, because in areas where tiger is not doing well within the protected areas, we can pursue our exclusive model there and get successes there. That's very well established. We have learned a lot. We have enough experience to do it. Um, we continue with that. But outside protected areas, what are the top priorities? One of them for me is the reverse the declining. So increase the presence of tigers in this landscape. Um, connect these our protected pop success stories. We have to connect those success stories. So the populations are doing very well. We need to connect them. Otherwise, what's the point of having this population doing very well and they are not connected? We need to connect them. It's very, very crucial. And make each individual population viable. That is very crucial. And how we can do is, if it cannot be done within the protected area boundary, then we have to do it outside and create a large population part, and then which is interconnected and but demographically viable. So in this case, then the non-protected role of non-protected area tiger habitat become very, very crucial. So the range expansion, we need to reverse the work here so that the more areas occupied by tigers. Viability of individual population we have to look at. So we have to address the scale mismatch issue. How we can do it, I will just go with come to it very soon. We need conservation plans for demographic viability, not just for protected areas, for the landscape. How are we going to achieve that? We have not done that. That exercise I don't come across anywhere, any document. We talk about landscape, we talk about corridors and connectivity, tiger movement, but we look at these large landscape planning for demographic viability, partly inside protected, partly outside, with the help of people. Connected populations, the importance of neighboring population become very, very crucial. So if you have a neighboring population, maybe about 5 kilometers, 10 kilometers, 20 kilometers from the protected population, not the other population, which is maybe about 200 kilometers, becomes very crucial because they can act as a stepping stone for the dispersing individuals. We may have to revisit our debate of 80s and late 70s of sloth single large or several small. I don't have time to go through that, but it's something we have to revisit, rethink about it, whether we need single large populations or we can create several small population and but create one larger demographically viable population. So what I'm suggesting is a nested metapopulation approach. And so you look at a landscape of Panna Tiger Reserve, you have a source population, which is not viable on its own, but there are some good habitats, maybe about good enough for two breeding females, one breeding female, three breeding females. We work them with our inclusive conservation models, and they are interconnected. So there is a dispersal happening, and some of them can be very strategically located, and so that it can be used as a stepping stone. So if you have a Panna to Bandhavgarh, about 150 kilometer length distance, the tiger to survive all through this will be very difficult to reach there. But if it divided into three, we create two stepping stones. There are three different distances to move. You divided it by three, and it's 50 kilometers. And tiger can move from one area to 50 kilometers, maybe in 2 days' time. So all of a sudden, it may be more viable connectivity. So we need to create a metapopulation structure within the landscape, and these two landscapes then are connected with the stepping stone. So you create a larger nested metapopulation structures. Nepal has done a little bit of work on this. The lessons we can learn from that we how to work with communities. India had really need to learn quite a lot to work with the communities from the Nepal. And this just gives you an idea that Panna then can be very, if by instead of protecting the entire corridors, we identify 2 or 3 stepping stones, not create protected areas, because we want the conservation benefit going to the communities. We need a different conservation model where communities are part of conservation approach, just not wildlife. We're targeting communities in here so that they participate in conservation, and all of a sudden all these landscapes can be connected. People think that tourism can be a game changer, can provide economic driver that is needed to generate incentives so that people participate in conservation and see tiger as a friendly creatures, which is true. We have done some studies, and for the last 10 years I've been working on this. And there is a lot of economic value that is generated, money which goes to the local community. But what I think is that it's not big enough. The tourism alone cannot provide all the economic incentive that is needed. Moreover, the problem I see with the tourism in India, wildlife tourism in India, is that it is not designed for wildlife conservation. It's the same model which we run in Taj Mahal, we have dumped in on our protected areas. So if I want to go and see Taj Mahal, I will decide my stay based on my choice and budget, buy a permit, go see Taj Mahal and come out. I do it same in our tiger reserve. So I select a hotel, a lodge, wildlife lodge based on my choice, my budget, buy a permit, go see a tiger and come out. We in the tiger industry, in the wildlife industry, say that we are employing local people. Same is Agra hotel also doing. It may not be doing 80% or 90% local people, but maybe 60 or 70%. The problem I see is that it's not designed for having an impact on conservation. So if my staff, who is from the local village, lives in the periphery of the park, continues to graze, continues to collect minor forest produce, continues dependent on the forest, then that's not the conservation tourism. We need to change that so that anybody who's benefiting from tourism actually a conservationist, turns conservationist, works as good as me, you, and everybody who's been working for tigers. And it's not very difficult. And that is what industry need to do. And what we have to do is we have to design the tourism in such a way that we create that kind of partnership with our community. So there is a cause and effect. So the money coming, then they have to be to participate in conservation. And how to generate that goodwill. There is a lot of examples all over the world there's been, and in India, we done a study, looked at the value of it. We realized that almost 55% of the turnover goes to the local community, but it's not having an impact on the ground because it's the industry, tourism is not designed for conservation purpose. So most of the staff who working or the people working continue to do what they were doing before they were partner of tourism partners. We need to change that. I think we're running out, so I will not go into this model, but there is a huge potential that the amount of money that can be generated from tourism. It can be a very important source of revenue, but it's not the only revenue that can that is needed for communities. So we need to work with the communities. Outside the protected areas, conservation is entirely dependent on the goodwill of local communities. And that community and goodwill, we need to develop several conservation-friendly economies. Like again, enough material is available, and communities they're desperately looking for changes in their life, changes how to increase that. So there are ways we can double their income and reduce the pressure on the protected areas and we do it honestly and effectively, then only you will see goodwill of local community. And that's what I am now working on. In an area, we have selected three villages where we think, which is quite far from the protected area, creating a satellite population, a stepping stone population, where we want to work with the communities. And that's where we created this small organization called Bhavan, and we're working on that. Then there are quite a bit of support from tourism industries and different organizations. And I will end here, Wilma. And if there are any questions, please do ask me.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Raghu. Yes, there are questions, and we will take the questions later. Thanks for that very comprehensive talk. And we certainly want to know more about tourism and creating wildlife-friendly communities. Maybe we can take that as a question later on. Thank you.
Thank you.
So next up, we have our speaker from Nepal, Dr. Kanchat Thapa. And Dr. Kanchat is the head of wildlife program at WWF Nepal. And he was involved in the preparation of the Tiger Conservation Action Plan for Nepal. And together with his team, he has implemented a monitoring protocol for tigers and their prey in the foothills of the Himalaya. And to our knowledge, the population of tigers in Nepal is on the rise. So we'd really like to hear from Dr. Kanchat what Nepal is doing right. So Dr. Kanchat is going to talk about tiger conservation in the foothills of the Himalayas. Dr. Kanchat, please.
Thank you. Let me. Can you see?
Yes, we see clearly.
Am I audible?
Yes, very good.
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to thank Singapore Wildcat Action Group for giving me this opportunity to talk on tiger conservation effort in Nepal. So my name is Kanchat Thapa. I'm the head of the wildlife program at WWF Nepal, and I'll be presenting on tiger conservation in the foothills of the Himalayas. Here, I'm not trying to mention about the WWF annual report, but the picture in it, trying to show the diversity of ecosystem within the country, where you can see the spotted deer and the rhinoceros grazing on the grassland, with the tall grassland and the riverine forest at the backdrop, and the high mountains and the Himalayas in the background. So the mosaic formed with the grassland, the water bodies, the wetlands, and the forests actually provides the suitable habitat for the high density herbivore population within this landscape, and that supports the high density of tigers in the country. Just to talk about the country itself, so we are the small nation between the two giant nations, India and Nepal, with not more than 900 kilometers in length and less than 200 kilometers in breadth-wise. But we have such a high altitudinal variation, ranging from 78 meters in the lowland area up to the height of the Everest, 8,842.63 meters, thus supporting the high variety, also the high richness in the biodiversity values and within the country. So while we talk about the lowland area, which are the prime lowland forests, which are the prime habitat for the tigers, the lowland area is often defined at less than 200 meters above mean sea level. Are the prime habitat for the tigers as well, but the lowland area is also the rice bowl for the country as well. And our agricultural productive land are very much so start from the edge of the forest, just increasing our chances, the nexus between the wildlife and the people. So historically, if you see, we have seen a lot of changes in our land use pattern as well. In last 300 years, most of our massive forest land has been cut down for the agricultural purpose, and as well as the government-backed resettlement program as well. So we have a large decrease in the forest cover change within the last 300 years. And now the forest stands approximately around 44%, and with 23% of our land surface under the protected area regime. So talking about the milestone of tiger conservation in Nepal. So it started with the promulgation of the National Park and Wildlife Conservation Act back in 1973. So it was the same year where there was a period where every country was establishing the protected area. Like, for example, the first national park in Yellowstone, in the US, the Yellowstone National Park. So during those time as well, so Nepal has also started establishing setting aside a core area for the conservation of our valued wildlife. So it all started in 1973. So with the promulgation of this act, the first national park was established back in 1970s with Chitwan National Park, which is also the World Heritage Site as well. So after this establishment, a series of other national park, the protected area were also established. A kind of a this was a kind of a stepping stone for the tiger conservation as well. And so if you see right now, the map shows, so we have a total of 20 protected areas within Nepal, and the 5 protected areas, that's Persha National Park in the central lowland area, Chitwan National Park, the adjoining park, the Bardea Bake National Park in the western region, the Bardea National Park, and the far western, the Suklafata National Park. So these are the prime habitat where we find the tigers today. And we also find the tigers outside the protected area, which we'll talk briefly later on. And these 5 protected areas actually is the source population for the tigers in Nepal. So talking about our landscape, prior to 2001, the tiger conservation effort were largely targeted within the source population in these 5 protected areas, as I mentioned. But after 2001, the government of Nepal envisioned, and India envisioned the almost 50,000 square kilometers of a landscape, whereby the 5 protected areas in Nepal and the 10 protected areas in India were connected by the forest, which are connected by the forest corridor to facilitate the species dispersal between the tiger bearing protected areas and to ensure their survival in the long run. And presently, both the government is running the longest project that is dedicated to the tiger conservation, known as the Tara Arc Landscape Project in this landscape and within the Nepal. So this is the only tiger landscape we have in Nepal. This slide where I'm trying to show just the infographic about the Tara Arc landscape. The forested area regime is of the total 25,000 square kilometer, almost 54% is the forest cover. But this is also area where the almost more than 7.5 million people lives as well. So this is also termed as a human-dominated landscape as well. And if you talk about the diversity, almost we have recorded around 85 mammal species, including the tiger and the greater one rhinoceros we found in this landscape. And with the rhinos, so we have a second largest population that's in Chitwan National Park, and with a satellite population in Burdian as well as in the Suklafata National Park as well. So talking about the tiger population within this landscape, current estimate is around like 235 tigers, so which is almost 93% increase in the population size in the last 10 years. So we have a baseline from the year 2009. And so this is almost 93% increase. From 121 to 235, so that's 95% increase. So which is almost near to, we are almost near to the government commitment to the global goals of doubling the tiger population as well. And if you talk about the individual wise tiger population in Nepal, the Baki National Park was recently established back in 2010 only, where also the tiger population has increased all the way from 4 to almost 21 in 2000 in last 8 years. So that's also shows a good tiger recovery within the last 8 years period, mostly due to the good protection, good conservation effort in this part of the national park. And also in the Bardia National Park, the population has almost fourfold increased in last 8 years from 18 to almost 87 estimated population size in last 8 years as well. And all these national park, the tiger population is well under the ecological carrying capacity as well. And in 2021, from the December onward, the Nepal is also going to do its 4th nationwide census as well. So by the mid of next year, in July, we'll have a next estimate on the tiger population as well, and we'll also try to see how near to we are to the global goal as well of doubling the tiger population as well. So among the various causes for the good tiger population over the period of a time, so one of the critical factor has been the prey-based population as well. The prey-based for tiger population has been supporting the growing population of the tiger population in the country. Yet we are facing a lot of challenges to maintain the productive habitat for maintaining this prey base as well, which has been challenging, and we are also working a lot to maintain this habitat for the prey base as well. So in Nepal, like apart from talking about the prey base, so we have 5 species of deer species. So that's spotted deer, sambar, swamp deer, barking deer, and the hawk deer, and also the last population of a wild boar as well. So which the tiger primarily feeds on. And so there are other antelopes as well. We find, and we have found the evidence of tiger, evidence of those in the tiger diet as well. So the picture we are seeing right now is the population of a swamp deer in the Suklafata National Park, where you can see the single largest herd of this population within the national park. So beside within the national park, so we find the tiger outside the protected area as well. So back in 2009, we did the survey as well. So that was a part of our national census. We started back in 2009, which we do every 5 years. So we have a baseline for tiger distribution outside the across the whole of the Tarak landscape as well. So our base estimate is 37% of our the potential tiger habitat is occupied by the tigers. And so each 5 years period, we are doing the similar survey as well. And over the time, we have been seeing the increase in tiger occupancy across the landscape as well. And just to know, like, it's a very labor incentive work to do this kind of a survey. So a lot of more than 300 volunteers, they walked for almost 2,200 kilometers just to get an information that the 27% of the landscape is actually used by the tigers. So whatever information, like one of the core information we have on the tiger is actually credited to Smithsonian Nepal Tiger Ecological Project, which was focused in Chitwan National Park under the leadership of Dr. John Seidensticker and Dr. Kirtiman Tamang. And it started in 1973, and this project actually showcased the Nepal wildlife, including the tiger conservation, to the outside world. And whatever information we have, the good core information on the tiger ecology actually credited to this project. And most of the prominent scientists have done their research work in this area in Chitwan National Park under this Smithsonian Nepal Tiger Ecology Project, like Professor Melson Quays, Professor Dave Smith, Dr. Eric Dynasting, and Chuck McDougall's. So they all work in the same area. So whatever information we have on the tiger ecology is to a good work done by them under this project. Regarding the monitoring of a tiger in the landscape, along with the Smithsonian Tiger Ecology Project, then Nepal also started monitoring its tiger in the wild. Besides radio collaring of the tiger, the camera trapping was first introduced back in 1970s by Chuck McDougall's using a pressure plate technology. And this was locally improvised. This was more kind of a mechanical means for triggering the camera trap. And the tiger picture you see here in these two tiger photographs, they were from that the pressure plate camera traps. So that was called, I think this is the first camera trap image of a tiger in the wild from Nepal. And you can see the picture of these two tigers hanging in most of the hotel lodges and even in the government office these days. So thanks to Chuck McDougall and his team for getting a first wild picture of tigers from Chitwan National Park. So after that, in the 70s, when we introduced the first the manually operated camera traps. So back in after, I think it's in middle of the 90s, where the government regularly started the monitoring of tigers within the landscape. So it started from the Bardea National Park back in 1990s when commercially available camera trap were available. So we used to have those analog, the 36 camera rolls to get we used during that time. So we have a limit of using only 36 pose for getting the tiger photograph from the wild. So that was a kind of a challenge, but it was a good start. So during that time, the main objective of this using this camera trap was to monitor the tiger in the wild and to see how many tigers are there, just to get the picture so that the manager would have idea about the distribution of the tigers in that particular area, and try to also guess estimate the tiger population within the national park. So I just wanted to highlight this picture because I like this very much. Her name is the Guti Queen. Guti, whenever the tiger is photographed in the wild, so first of all, which area they are photographed. So they take a name from that particular area, and whether it's male or female, so they tag both the name and it's given the name for that unique tiger. So her name is the Guti Queen. So Guti is the name of the place within the Bardea National Park where it was taken, and the Poti means the female. So you have a kind of idea where it's the tiger from, also looking at the name as well. And what I like about this picture is this is the most stylish tiger picture taken during that time from the camera trap. And I think still the hotel lodges actually show the photograph of these tigers even today. So just to get an idea, so we have able to get a number of tiger photographs during that time and try to see how the tiger population within that time. But the analysis was not so much robust method, analysis technique was not so much developed during that time. So we just have a kind of a minimum tiger population estimate from each of the national park. So just to get the tiger evolution over the period of a time. So back in 2009 onwards, we did kind of a baseline. There was no baseline for the tiger population across our area. So the tiger, first of all, the monitoring protocol was developed back in 2000 and it was also revised in. 2017 as well. And that's how we did the monitoring of the tiger. So it started from tracing through the tracing down on the paper all the way to the use of the DNA technology. So that's a kind of evolution of the tiger monitoring protocol in Nepal. So just a glimpse of the how we are almost like 2,000 grid across the 5 national park where we deploy our camera traps and we get the tiger image, and according with the robust method available today, so we estimate the tiger from each of the national park. So as I mentioned, the tiger is the only tiger landscape in the country. So this was based on tiger dispersal model. So where the corridor were also identified, that's connect between the 15 protected area within the whole of the landscape between Nepal and India. And the government of Nepal from both the countries are working in the corridor area. So trying to establish the degraded, trying to restore, protect and manage the corridor area as well. And we are seeing and one of the starting point was taking a leverage from the community as well. So the community-based conservation also helped a lot in actually helping the corridor restoration within this landscape as well. Just to give an idea about, so we are regularly monitoring this corridor area for to see the the dispersal of wildlife within the corridor as well. So far this corridor has been we are able to maintain the functionality of this corridor with respect to the species for dispersal, especially with the large mammals as well, for rhino, elephant, and the tigers. So we are regularly monitoring this as well. In last 20 years, I would say that most of these 8 of these corridor identified across the Nepal landscape has been very much functional over the good conservation effort over the period of a time. Just to in the recent years, like we have been seeing a lot of the tiger movement across the high altitude tiger area, the land as well. In April 2020, we have seen the tiger almost at the 2,500 meter. Recorded the tiger at 2,500 meters. So it's a kind of give a lot of good information to the lawmakers, the decision makers, as well as the managers. Look, now the tiger is not only confined within the protected areas, but they are also moving out. And now they are actually trying, because the connectivity from the lowland to the higher elevation area is also well connected. So now the tigers are also moving up. And back in November 2020, so we find another evidence of the tigers in the eastern part of the Nepal as well. So around like 3,100 meters by the red panda conservation group. When they were trying to monitor for the red panda, we find the evidence for the tiger as well. And while we are trying to grasp the information, what could be the source population for this tiger as well? So back in May 2019, the Sikkim government has provided the press release regarding the tiger conservation, the tiger in their locality as well, and trying to see the match between the 2 tigers. So we have seen the same tiger. So the tiger in the eastern part is actually has a connection between Sikkim and as well, which has a direct connection with the Bhutan as well. So the tigers are moving across the northern frontier as well, which I'm trying to depict with this slide. A few of them still, like with all the achievement and all the milestone we have achieved over the period of time. So there are few key challenges we need to be addressed. So one is the illegal wildlife crime. Although we have been very much success in trying to have a secure space for our tiger population, yet the poaching and the illegal wildlife trade is on the rise. So recently there has been a increase in the tiger poaching situation, especially in the western part of the landscape, and the government is trying the local enforcement agency are trying their best to address this issue. And the second problem is the human-wildlife tiger conflict. So there has been a lot of a conflict in the recent times, especially in the Bardia National Park. I would say in last 1 year, almost 14 people lost their lives, which has been very unfortunate. So all the conservation organization is helping the government trying to address this issue even within that part of the landscape. And these are the key issue we need to tackle at the current situation. And next is habitat loss and the degradation, and particularly the water crisis is also becoming a major issue within the national park as well, because most of our the highland area, the dam has been developed, and where the water has been diverted for the irrigation purpose as well, and that's also creating, you know, the change in the behavior, change in the ecology of the wildlife as well, and that's also one of the problem which the people in the living across the buffer zone are trying to see, is that these are also creating a conflict with the wildlife in the recent times. And other has been the infrastructure development. A lot of infrastructures are coming up, coastal highway, the expansion of the east-west highway, and also the irrigation canal has been are being planned in the tiger landscape as well. And their density within this core area is so much high that it will have a long-term effect on the tiger as well, not only in the disrupting their dispersal, but also impacting the core population as well. So having all these issues, so we do have a guiding document which also guide the conservation action in the ground, primarily by our landscape strategy, which has a really good I'll just want to wrap up. So we have a tiger conservation action plan as well, which also guide us with the priority action that needs to be work in the field, and all the infrastructure work has been, we are trying to come up with the guideline for building the linear infrastructure guideline infrastructure as well, and which is now in the government for their endorsement. So so these are all guiding principle actions that are guiding our conservation effort in the ground. Having said that, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kanchat. That last photo of the tigers by the water was beautiful. Thank you very much. Yeah, such a beautiful photograph. Thank you very much for insight into tiger conservation in Nepal. I'm sure lots of people have questions, and we'll take the questions later. Thanks very much. Now we will go on to our speaker from Bhutan, Mr. Kuenley Tenzin. And let me introduce Kuenley. Kuenley comes from the eastern part of Bhutan and has a degree in life sciences. He has worked also with WWF. So Dr. Kanchat and Kuenley are from WWF. So today we have WWF takeover. Yesterday was WCS takeover. So he has worked with WWF for 5 years, where he has focused on conservation of endangered animals like the tiger, snow leopard, elephant, red panda, and clouded leopard. He's also been working on human-wildlife coexistence, protected area management, transboundary conservation, people-centric conservation, and community-based forest resource management, amongst others. All this is done to help the royal government of Bhutan's vision of protecting the iconic species and hence securing forest cover for the benefit of wildlife and the people of Bhutan. Kuenley, please present your talk.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Bilma, for the wonderful introduction. And by the way, can you see my screen? And am I all audible? So just to be sure.
Yes, we can see and we can hear you.
Okay,
Very
thank
good.
you. So yeah, it was really interesting to hear from Dr. Raghu and Dr. Kanchat about the work that's being done from India as well as Nepal. And we also, being in the same landscape, I'm happy and share our stories from the same landscape that we are trying to do for the tiger conservations being part of this larger landscape. So yeah, just to begin with, I believe the participants are from the diverse group, and to just give you an introduction on where the country is located. So Bhutan is basically a small landlocked country, just like Nepal, sandwiched between the two big countries, China in the north and India to the south, which has equally about 4 billion populations, and in between we are just about 0.7 million people living, where the landscape is challenged with so many development activities, as well as the natural habitat degradation. So that's where the country is located. And just to begin my presentation, we strongly believe and are getting the people here in Bhutan inspired by the leadership of His Majesty the King, who has been always there guiding the people on the conservation activities. And I just borrowed a quote from His Majesty's speech in one of the university in Japan that he has delivered back in 2011. So I would like to quote his speech by reading that the problem facing the world today, they challenge all of us squarely, and the solution to this challenge must come from a real sense of concern and care for others, and for all the sentient beings and for the future generations. And we must care about what happens to this earth, unquote. So this is one of the powerful speech that we always draw upon from the leadership that His Majesty has always visioned for the country in conservation. And coming back to the protected area systems in Bhutan, so I'll just like to give a small introduction about the landscape, how it is being organized and divided within the protected as well as not protected areas. So as you know that Bhutan is being a small landlocked country, which we are just about 38,294 square kilometer, out of which 19,750.57 square kilometer is for the protected areas, which includes the biological corridors. And one of the good political will that we have in the constitutions, enshrined in the constitution, is we have to have minimum of 60% of forest covers for all time to come. That's why we have 71% of the forest cover under forest regime, out of which 52% falls within the protected area systems. And to talk about the protected area systems, we have 10 protected area systems, followed by 14 forest divisions, and each one of the protected areas is connected by the biological corridors, which I will try to elaborate in the following slides. And going back to the history of Bhutan, in tiger conservation, we strongly rely and borrow our concept from the religion perspective as well. Because in Buddhism, Bhutan being a Buddhist country, we strongly believe that there is a strong sense of connections from the religion itself. As you see on the picture here, there's a temple built in between the giant rock, and the main shrine in that temple is called Tiger's Nest, which literally means that back in the 8th century, the second Lord Buddha that we commonly call as Guru Rinpoche, when he visited Bhutan, he came to Bhutan riding on a tigers, and then he subdued some local deities over there and tried to over the time, and then he built that temple, and one of the main shrines, as you see the picture that I have depicted in the sky, showing about one of the forms of Guru Rinpoche riding on the tigers, is one of the key shrines that's being put up in that particular temple, and it dates back to 8th century. And if you see along that same monastery, in between the rocks, we have a very intact virgin forest, which is a very good suitable habitat for the tiger tribe. So So this is the place called Para, which we have some evidence of tigers staying in these virgin forests. And moving on with the tiger conservation here in Bhutan. So I'd like to take briefly through the milestones, how we initiated the tiger conservation works. So it was back in 1999, about 230.7 hectares of biological corridors were declared to meet the ecological as well as biological need of the tigers. And moving on, back in 2014, in short, we call B2C2, Bhutan Biological Conservation Complex was established. This is basically a landscape strategy that is to conserve the country's biological diversity for many years to come. And fast forward in 2006, Bhutan's first Tiger Action Plan was developed, and following that one, now we are into the second Tiger Action Plan implementations. And 2018, Bhutan joined the Global Tiger Initiative and became one of the 13 tiger range countries to commit our commitment to double the number of tigers in TRC. And in 2013, about 670,000 hectares of Indo-Bhutan transboundary landscape. In short, we call TRAMCA. It is basically a transboundary landscape strategy agreed and operationalized to ensure a long-term genetic and demographic viability of tiger in the region, which I'm going to elaborate more in the following presentations as well. And in 2015, an estimated of 103 tigers for Bhutan was released as the number from Bhutan, which is about 39% increase over 1998 baseline. In 1998, when this tiger survey was done, it was not done scientifically. It was done through science surveys and interview from the local people that they have seen or encountered the tigers. So basically, there is about 39% of the increase in population. And coming to a particular site called Royal Manas National Park, the tiger population has doubled from 2011 baseline of tiger of 10 individual tigers. And in 2018 is one of the biggest milestones in the conservation history of Bhutan, where Bhutan's policy of maintaining large protected area landscape connected by corridor is being divided now, and subsequently the Royal Government of Bhutan initiated Bhutan for Life financing mechanism for permanence in 2018 to hold hope for that B2C2 landscape to continue to sustain our tiger future, to provide a secure and safe haven for the wild tigers in Bhutan. So that's a brief milestones for the tiger conservation in Bhutan. And the slides you see here is on the right is the tiger conservation strategy that was developed back in 1998, as you must have already heard through Dr. Kanchanat's presentation, which was basically held by Dr. Charles McDougall back in 1998 with the help of our local biologists. And in the following years, in 2000, first tiger image was captured through the scientific monitoring of the tigers using camera traps, which was recorded at an elevation of 4,110 miles from of the sea level. And now, if you see this map, so as I said earlier, Bhutan has 10 protected areas, out of which are 10 protected areas and about 14 forest divisions. And each protected divisions with the adoption of B2C2 connectivity and with the adaptation of biological corridors, this has provided a very good a synergy for any kind of species movement from a source size to a sink size. So if you see the map here, I just like to show that the red dotted ones are the tiger locations spotted in Bhutan. So which basically means that tigers tigers are moving from as low as about 100 meters to about 4,000 meters above sea levels, which is an indication that our biological corridors are helping the connectivity for the tigers to disperse from one protected areas to the another protected areas, as well as it is helping the movement of the tigers to go beyond the protected areas, basically referring back to Dr. Raghu's presentation about the forest divisions, how we are providing the security and the enabling environments for the tiger to stay safe in the forest divisions. So some of with our records, it indicates that with this kind of connectivity, it's allowing our tigers to disperse from each protected areas to another and to the forest divisions as well. So as I was talking earlier in my slides, the tiger movements was recorded from about low as 100 meter to about 4,110 meters above sea level. So one of the interesting stories that we have recorded is a tiger back in the about 2001, a tiger from Royal Manas National Park, which is located at a subtropical level at about 100 meters from the sea level. A tiger was seen and being recorded in the camera tabs and traveling as far as high as 4,000 meters above the sea level, same tiger. So it's an indication that our commitment and the systems that the government has put in for the connectivity and movement of species is working well for this kind of situation here in Bhutan. So it's an indication that the connectivity within the country is helping the species to thrive well, despite having the other anthropogenic pressures that we have, similar to the Southeast Asia as well as Nepal and India. And now coming down, narrowing down to some of the interventions or the works that we are currently doing is one of the for the tiger conservation is about the transboundary conservation that we initiated back in 2010. So it's called, in short, we call TRAMCA. It's a transboundary initiative between Bhutan and India. Initially, when we started, it was started as an informal kind of a setting where the lead was done by the NGOs and CSOs on both sides of the country, and gradually over the years we involved the government officials working on the side, and gradually it elevated at a state level on the Indian side, and then at the central level on the Bhutan side, and that's how we come our journey on expanding our landscape for the tigers to thrive well in the wild, because as per our data, most of the tiger concentrations in Bhutan was found in Royal Manas National Park, which is located adjacent to the Indian Manas National Park. So that's how we tried to form this landscape as a transboundary Manas conservation area for especially targeting and the health of to look after the tiger, simultaneously taking care of other thematic areas. And when we when we analyze the data from 2007 to 2070 from this transboundary initiative that we initiated, so gradually we noticed that from a little of 3 individual tigers back in 27, we noticed about almost double the number of tigers were seen there over the years until 2017. So in 2016 and 17, we recorded about 31 tigers in Manas National Park alone, as well as we recorded 17 individuals of tigers in Royal Manas National Park. That's from the analysis, it clearly indicates that this kind of initiatives along along the borders with the transboundary initiatives is helping for the tiger movement as well as the tiger dispersal from the source site to the sink sites where it's being connected to the beautiful landscapes that is being taken care of. And I took this data from the Global Forest Watch data. So if you see in the region, so this is just in the middle, the map is the Bhutan, and it's surrounded by Northeast India. And if you see the green patches indicates that there's a huge pressure on the deforestation expected, and we are going to see some loss in the habitats, the deforestation rates coming in. And equally, we have the pressures along the borders. We see a lot of hunting and illegal poaching happening. Poaching as well as illegal hunting happening along the borders, especially in these two adjacent parks in the middle of the border. And some of the evidence that we have from some of the years that the record shows is some of the tigers are moving from both the landscapes are being poached and traded across the borders, and we lost some of the beautiful tigers over the years as well. And this is some of the hotspot areas where the poaching is rampant along the borders. And simultaneously, climate change is also impacting the risks of flooding in the transboundary foothills. We have already seen there's a huge flash floods taking tolls in our landscape and affecting the livelihoods along the border. And for this, in order to address this at all level, with the initiation of the dialogue at the common level, both at both the countries. So we need our long-term goal is to secure the circled landscape for the connectivity as to allow the wildlife and the species to thrive well along these landscapes. But for that, we need a very large amount of time and resources. And our critical need is to secure some of the critical areas that has been and seen changes over the times. And with our small team of researchers, we undertook a small analysis along the border. So when the data was compared back in 2000 and 2017, so and this analysis was carried away on the border about a 5 kilometer buffer in 2017, and 2001 about 10 kilometer buffer along the border. So the small analysis clearly indicated that there's a lot of deforestation rates happening at a very extensive rate, and the forest we see earlier back in 2000 was very good, and in 2017 we see the forest is being cleared for the agriculture as well as some commercial activities. So some of the patches of forest are being getting lost over the years. So when this small analysis was run, so the changes estimated along this small area that we try to bring under control for the benefit of the wildlife as well as the people living in the small landscape is about, in Bhutan, we expected about 518.6 hectares of deforestation. In India, about 1,421.87 hectares of deforestation are expected to happen over the years. So immediately, in order to secure this landscape, we, as part of the transboundary initiative that we undertook, we organized an annual dialogue with the counterparts from both the countries, and bring on the table the issues and the challenges happening around along that landscape. So the areas that needed urgent attention, which need to be secured immediately, was the ones we saw from a small analysis done back in 2018. And it's clearly indicated in the circles circled along the border here. And over the years, with our interventions and dialogue from the goodwill, political will of both the government of Assam and the government of Bhutan, there was very good actions being taken on the ground. So, because on Bhutan side, there's already a protected area being declared, and on the Indian side, the issue was facing. So on earlier this year, on June 10th, the government of Assam took a very good decision to declare the degraded area, which is a patch of which used to be a forest reserve forest earlier, by declaring into a national park called Raimona National Park. So slowly we are taking stepping stones to securing this landscape, and with this we expect to build a larger landscape. And with this news of establishment and the bold decisions taken by the government of Assam, we plan to bring this. If you see on the map, we plan to bring this whole of area to be proposed as a friendship park, so that the landscape is secured from all those anthropogenic pressure, as well as the climatic changes and the various factors that is affecting the landscape for the tiger conservations along this kind of landscapes. And the intention is to restore the landscape as the land of the tigers and elephants, and it can provide the buffer against the negative impact of climate change, which one of the examples I showed was the flash floods, and can provide benefits from conservation programs by improving the livelihoods at the local community. And it will provide peace and tranquilities around the border areas. And the future challenges or the opportunities I see along the landscape is land use change with urbanization, roads, infrastructure, agriculture, deforestation, and changes to hydrological regimes such as hydropower, flood mitigations, groundwater extraction, and equally we have these demographic and social changes with the immigration, social influx, education, mobility, and other areas. Could be policy changes with the development and market access, tourism, and industrialization as well. And finally, with climate changes, such as on the impact on hydrology, agriculture, and biodiversity. And we could see it as an opportunity for us to work if we are to work on this kind of initiatives to provide connectivity and secure the landscape for the benefit of the people and the wildlife in these areas. And with the challenges along the way, we also have some of the big wins coming in the tiger conservations. So as some of you must be aware that 2 sites in Bhutan has been accredited as conservation issue tiger standards approved sites, meaning that the sites have all the minimum required international standards to be qualified as a CAT sites, which is providing all those enabling management regimes, as well as the needed interventions required from the management for the conservation of wild tigers in these 2 sites. And last year, as an initiative to the base model, as well as the hard work put in by the enforcement agencies in these 2 protected areas, the Royal Manas National Park in Bhutan and Manas Tiger Reserve in India was awarded a Joint Conservation Excellence Award for demonstrating an excellent management regimes, as well as other committed required interventions that is needed for the recovery of tigers across the borders. So these are some of the big wins that we have achieved over the years as well in tiger conservation. And just to end my slide, I would like to show these beautiful tigers with the 3 cubs we have captured from one of the forest divisions in Bhutan last year. And this interesting story about these tigers and the 3 cubs is these tigers was first initially spotted and recorded during the National Tiger Survey back in 2015. And over a span of 7 years, these tigers was not spotted anywhere in between the camera trap exercise for the tiger monitoring which was undertaken over the years. So we are happy and glad to see that after 7 years, this tigers was spotted with a beautiful 3 cubs hanging along with her in the beautiful forests, and it is an indication that the enabling factors or the interventions that we are putting on the grounds are helping to keep safe these wild tigers happy in the forest, especially to provide a good sites for these tigers. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Kuenley. And what a lovely story to end off with, that a tiger is spotted again after 7 years and with 3 cubs. So thanks so much for telling us more about tiger conservation in Bhutan, and congratulations on the success. Now we will proceed with the question and answer. And over to you, Carmen, to start the question and answer off. Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I'm here. There are quite a few questions that came in. Let's start with one for Dr. Raghu Chundawat. So how intense is the human-tiger conflict outside of the protected areas, especially antagonistic interactions between tigers and domestic animals, and how are these issues addressed? So Dr. Raghu, please.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, so it's very variable. It's very different in different parts of the country, because culturally we are so diverse. So it's very variable. But of course, once you go outside the area, when tiger is there, or any wildlife is there, when the local community is struggling in a day-to-day basis, making their life, hard to survive economically, it's very any losses, whether it comes from crop damage, whether it comes from livestock loss to predators, is very intense. And the thing is that they have to survive every day, so they're not looking at the future. They have to survive today, or for a week, or for a month. Then their vision is limited to that shorter period. Unless we make these communities economically secure, then only they can look at the future and the value of tiger in their forest, or the forest value. They are not ignorant people, but they have to make a living. Any losses then becomes an issue. So it's an issue. It's an economic issue, I would say, rather than anything else. And we need to address that. And the Indian growth of 6%, 8%, if you look at it in the tiger habitat rural areas, it may not be growing, maybe 2%, or maybe in the decline in some areas. So we need to have a very equitable economic growth. And in these tiger habitat, we need to also not have the same development plan and economic development strategies implementing in tiger habitat. We need different strategies which are conservation friendly to address these conflict issues.
Thank you, Dr. Raghu. If you're not too shy, would you be okay to turn on your camera so I can put a
Sorry.
spotlight? It's
Okay,
okay.
sorry.
It's okay. Okay, now I'm going to put it in the spotlight. Okay, Vilma, do you want to ask the next question?
Yes, this is to all the participants. All the panelists. Someone is asking, it seems that many of the NGOs in the region are heavily dependent on foreign support, either wholly run by foreign organizations or receive significant funding from them. From a financial perspective, how much of your yearly budgets come from local sources, government or individual donations versus foreign funds? This is to everyone. Anyone can start.
I can start. In India, yes, there is a lot of money available from and philanthropic investment and also in the social causes. But when you come to environment related funding, that's very limited. And recently, it's been very, very difficult to have foreign currency coming in with you need clearances, bureaucratic procedures have become very, very strict. So very difficult. And a lot of NGOs have lost that source of funding. Earlier, big organizations used to get money and then can give the local smaller NGOs like us, but that's also gone. So it's a significant impact on the NGOs struggling. Some NGOs are looking towards the government funding to do some of the work, and then it's not very good because then you towing the line of the government, and you need. And India has been a country where NGO had played very, very crucial role and very game-changing role in conservation. And I think it's sad if we lose the support from outside because there's not much available in India locally.
Thank you. What about Dr. Kanchat?
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's hard to say like how many percent or what's the significant about the money. I don't have a direct answer to that, but NGO cannot directly work within the country. So our working style is we are supporting the government and the NGO and the community-based organization working in the field. So whatever funding from our side is not directly funding the standalone activities, but it's the majority is funding is from the government itself, and so we sit together and to see where the gap is in the current activities that the government is trying to pursue. So our support is mainly fulfilling that gap. So that's our approach in working with the government and with the community as well. In the recent time, especially, we have been, as Dr. Chundawat mentioned, the funding from the government, from the NGO side in the wildlife conservation very much limited and has also significantly decreased in the recent time as well due to the COVID situation as well. But we have been working hard, So right now there are GA related funding like from the GEF, GCF that's been coming to the government directly, and NGO is supporting in that as well. And there has been other resources from the foundation and as well through the WWF network, talking from the WWF network side. So that's also been coming up, and that directly goes to the government and as well as to the community, especially funding the government activities which they plan to do. So thanks.
Thank you. Kuenley?
I'd like to also echo the same thing just shared by Dr. Kanchana. It's no different. Bhutan is no different from India and Nepal model as well. So as more majority of the fundings is put in from the government treasury, like supporting the staff time, staff costs, as well as the field. If there is any requirement to do the co-funding, that's where the NGOs like us come into play and help to leverage the activities on the ground. Otherwise, most of the activities and the initiatives are being taken by the government agencies themselves. But I cannot give a definite answer to the budget allocation level, because since before joining WWF, I also worked in the government agency, and in annual year education, from my experience, they allocate about 60 to 70% of the budget needed for the conservation works in the country. So it's no different from India, Bhutan, India and Nepal as well.
Wilma, can I just, since we are on the funding thing, and can I just, not a question,
Yes.
but something I want to know from our speaker from Bhutan, Kuenley, to say, Kuenley, I believe that Bhutan, what it has done is very unique initiatives taken by creating conservation trust fund, and it's been very successful. It will be very useful if you can tell us how it works and whether how much you have invested, how it's done, and whether it's really made a big significant difference, because several other tiger range country will benefit from that, I think.
Thank you for raising that, Dr. Raghu. So since it's you rightly pointed out, it's a very good initiative from the royal government. It's under the visionary leadership of His Majesty, because of his leadership and the thought process. That's how the evaluation and establishment of the Bhutan Trust Fund for Environment Conservation was established sometimes back in 2000, I believe, which I cannot share, tell you the details about how the functioning of the trust fund is. But as far as I know, working with some of the staffs there, they shared that it's a kind of a seed fund that they keep it in the trust fund, and if at all, for example, if the country is run out of money for environmental related or the conservation related activities, then that's where the money comes from, gets out of pulled out of the bank and gets distributed for the conservation efforts or the environmental works in Bhutan. But without having to wait for the money to be exhausted, to be pulled out, they simultaneously do some kind of fund disbursement by calling some innovative grant proposal from the NGOs as well as the government agencies within the country, and they try to screen out the best proposals which have some of the impactful the visions that's coming out from the proposals. So in a nutshell, that's only I can tell you about this trust fund initiative that is being undertaken here in Bhutan.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Maybe we go to another question, Carmen.
Yeah, okay. There's a question also for all three speakers. All three of you have mentioned poaching. And so how are the threats of poaching in all your countries currently being dealt with? For example, what are the laws? What are the penalties in terms of to discourage poaching? And do you think that these penalties should be increased? Maybe again, we start with the order of presentation. So Dr. Raghu, and then Dr. Kanchat, and then Mr. Kuenley. Thank you.
Thank you. In India, we have the very strict laws that to control, and India is actually over-legislated country in a way. Implementation is a little poor, but we have all the laws that is needed to control poaching and deal with illegal poaching or anything illegal activity. For me, the poaching is not just poaching. You know, the law, and they have not defined it. And for me, that's the problem, because any kind of poaching is dealt with the same same way. For me, that I differentiate two different kind of poaching. One is one which is done by the professionals, and one which is done by the local villagers, if you would like to say. And the person local villagers who dealt with, do this kind of activity without knowing that he is doing an illegal activity. If his crop field is being raided by animals, wild animals, he will put an electric fence. And he don't know that by doing this, if he's killing, he will have 7 years imprisonment, or or much serious penalties. So I want, innocent is not the right word, but he's not knowing what's happening. But it's a very chronic in nature. But it's not going to decimate the population. It's just a chronic in nature. It's happening every year. It's happening everywhere, and it's because they are not criminals. We have to deal with them differently, I think. But laws doesn't do that. And then it really makes the life difficult for the family. The anti-conservation sentiment sets in, sees conservation as a really terrible thing for their family or the community. Whereas the professional poachers are maybe criminals, you can put in it. They have legal support system with them. They are highly efficient. And they're market driven, so they are not there everywhere. So if I am a anti-patrolling officer, I will often catch these villagers who doing wood cutting, grazing, or setting up traps, or electric fencing and things like that. Whereas if I will rarely find these professional poachers, because they are very smart, they have intelligence, where to go and how to do it. So we need to deal with them very severely, maybe more strictly than we are doing right now. So we have in India fantastic laws there, and we may not be the best doing it, taking advantage of that really well, but it's been done very effectively. But poaching still happens and will continue to happen. I don't think we will that poaching is going to disappear. It's how well we manage our populations with the help of these laws. So India does have a good legal framework, I would say.
Okay. Thank you. Dr. Kanchan?
Yeah, in Nepal as well, as in India, we have a strict protection measures offered by our act. So especially we have a protection list of wildlife. So if any of the wildlife in that particular list, if is poached and if he or she is convicted, so there's a strict laws, punishment as well. So there's I think 50,000 to almost 1 lakh rupees, and or both with the imprisonment as well from 5 to 15 years or both. So there's the strict laws from the government side. And regarding how it is dealt, like at the field level, so the chief wildlife warden, so he takes the leadership in managing the protection unit within the national park, and that includes the Nepal Army as well. So which support the chief wildlife warden, and outside the protected areas, it's under the Division Forest Office, which look after the forest outside the protected areas, and also if any poaching or the timber related issues. So there's a strict protection, I mean the laws as well. And the main law enforcement agency in that case is the Division Forest Office. And so we have the system called the Wildlife Crime Control Bureau, the district cells, and which comprises of the Division Forest Office and the chief and the wildlife warden in the major hotspot area where the poaching problem and the illegal wildlife trade problem is very severe. In those areas, they have formed the kind of a coordination mechanism. So according to that, the security issues is also dealt, especially focusing on the wildlife conservation. So we have the armed unit with the Nepal Police Force is called APF. So that looks after in the border points, especially they also helped in the illegal wildlife, in controlling the illegal wildlife trade as well. So that's the one unit at the border point. And any illegal activities outside the protected area regime. So that's also under, there's a special unit within the Nepal Police, it's called CIB, Central Investigation Bureau, CIB, what's it's called. So they do look after the illegal wildlife trade. The fifth pillar they call it. So that's particularly focused on curbing the illegal wildlife trade issues in particular. Thanks.
Yeah, Kuenley?
It's the same thing for Bhutan as well. So we are also guided by the Forest and Nature Conservation Act of Bhutan, which is subsequently enriched by the forest rules and regulations, where we have a very clear defined rules of each stakeholders pertaining to the wildlife and the flora, both flora and fauna cases happening in the Bhutan. For example, if there is a tiger case, then if a person is caught with a tiger skin, then he or she is levied a fine of a minimum of 100,000 Bhutanese currency (BTN), and on top of that, if he or she is caught with the parts, other parts like bones, teeth, and all, and it's calculated based on the formulas and the list that is assigned and listed within the act, as well as the rules and regulations. And on the ground, like in Nepal, we also have systematic procedures wherein for example, if a crime is happening within the forest jurisdiction of the forest divisions or protected area, then it's handled at a local level within the power of that particular park manager, and they try to see and weigh the pros and cons and consult the legal divisions of the ministry, concerned ministry that they are assigned with. And if the situation demands to be handled at the national level, then at the national level, they have a dedicated full-time enforcement unit that is particularly established to look after the wildlife crime prevention, as well as the protections of the staffs working within the forest and park services. And in addition to the enforcement agencies that is particularly to deal with the forests and park services, we also have a very good system within the judiciary as well, wherein a separate green bench is established particularly to study and provide best judgment in terms of wildlife and related environment-related crimes, wherein the judges are trained specifically for this kind of prosecutions. So it's pretty much same in all, I believe, in all the three countries.
Thank you. Yeah, it's
Wilma, if you don't mind, I was seeing the name of the participant, and the two best experts on the subject are here. If you want to take their opinion, if we can ask
Sure.
Belinda Wright and Debbie Banks there. And
Wow.
I think you
Yes.
won't get better person to talk about this thing if you have time.
Belinda Wright and Debbie Banks, thank you for being here. Please, could you add your view on this, poaching? Yep. Yep.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Hi there. Well, at the moment, there's a lot of changes happening in that the really organized poaching gangs are less active in certain areas, and a lot of them are now focusing on pangolin trade, and they're still in wildlife crime, but not so much with big cats. And we've lost more tigers in the first 7 months of this year than I think any other first 7 months in the past 7 or 8 years. So the losses have been, the numbers of tiger deaths have been up, but strangely, not from organized poaching gangs. Most of the losses have been from local poaching and from bushmeat poaching, a lot of tiger deaths, just the tigers getting caught in traps that were set for wild boar and deer, and quite a few electrocution deaths, a few road deaths, and quite a lot of infighting. So at the moment, things are quite changing. I mean, if we were having this conversation 3 years ago, it was a completely different scenario to what it is at the moment. It's not because the gangs have disappeared. It's just that they're doing other things in most places. There's a lot of activity on the Indo-Nepal border, having said that, which I think is very worrying. And there's been quite a lot of poaching in the Terai region, and a lot of the trade, I think, is going through Nepal. So there needs to be a much better coordination between India and Nepal, I think, on that front. Thank you.
Thank you, Belinda. Debbie?
Thank you. Of course, as the Environmental Investigation Agency, we're not looking so much at the poaching aspects of the trade chain, but more to do with the demand and the trafficking aspects of the trade chain. As Belinda mentioned, there is still poaching and trafficking of tiger parts and derivatives for demand that is primarily driven and financed by demand from China, but also Vietnam. So there are, in the context of this particular track where we're looking at South Asia, there are good reasons to be concerned still that there is poaching of tigers, but alongside many other species where the body parts may enter trade as raw ingredients for traditional Chinese medicine. There was as Dr. Thapa mentioned recently, the Central Investigation Bureau of Nepal and the police in Nepal have made some significant arrests related to the role of trade destined to China. And most recently, the police in Nepal uncovered a Chinese gang involved in gambling that also had tiger and musk deer parts in their possession. I think with the Belts and Roads Initiative and the increase in potential new infrastructure on the Nepal China border areas, whether that's roads, railways, or other internal developments around economic zones, where we've seen those kinds of infrastructures take place in Southeast Asia, for example, in Laos or even Myanmar. Very often those special economic zones come with casinos, and they come with other infrastructure that encourages and facilitates trade. So I think looking forward, it'll be very important to put in place mitigating measures as to what those potential impacts of the Belts and Roads Initiative may facilitate ongoing trade in not just tiger, but leopard, pangolin, rhino, bear, musk. So lots of things to keep an eye on.
Thank you, Debbie. It's wonderful that we have people, some experts to give their view as well. Poaching is such a downer, even, very much so in Southeast Asia. So we're really happy to hear from all of you about some of the challenges that you face and some of the good laws you have and some of the enforcement that you have as well. I think Carmen's got her eye on the clock as well. Is it time for the question, Carmen?
Yes, we are running behind, and we appreciate, Debbie and Belinda helping us to answer the question, and our speakers for staying on a little bit longer. So I'm going to let Vilma ask the last question, please.
Yes. So the last question is this, to our three speakers. If you had a wish, just one wish, and your wish was granted tomorrow, what would your wish be for tigers? We start with Dr. Raghu and then Dr. Kanchan and then Kuenley. But of course, if you can't think of it, then somebody else can go first.
Yeah, no, deciding on one thing is very difficult. I wish that tiger find in next 10 years friendly communities wherever it travels.
Thank you, and we really wish that wish comes true. Dr.
I
Kanchan?
think one one thing that strike my mind is to have a tiger conservation, and especially the next generation can really see the tigers in the wild. So that's the kind of wish I have. Thanks.
Thank you.
And
Kuenley?
yeah, my wish is to have the tigers the same level of hope and aspirations that people associate at the moment for the tigers for the years to come, and creating a same level of coexistence that we see here in Bhutan and across the tiger rich countries. And hopefully, my dream is to see some of the tigers moving back to the South Asian countries as well.
Thank you, and may all your wishes come true. We really appreciate you sharing your expertise and experience with us and your wishes. We're going to pass this back to Carmen, but before we do that, Kuenley, we have no time to show your lovely video. Just to let everyone know that Kuenley has a video on women in conservation. But what we will do is we will try to show it tomorrow. We have 2 speakers tomorrow, and should we have some time, we'll show that 4-minute video because, well, I'm sure we're all dying to see it. At least I am. So thanks. Over to Carmen.
Okay, thank you, Vilma. Yeah, thank you again to all our speakers and to our 2 additional speakers, Debbie and Belinda, and for all your time, sharing all your experience and your expertise with us. And of course, we appreciate all that you guys are doing for tiger conservation in India, Nepal, and Bhutan. And I want to thank everyone who stayed with us, who joined us tonight and stayed with us throughout. I hope you have been inspired to take action for tigers. And I'm going to repeat this again, as I've done for the past 3 days. One way that you can help is to donate to tiger conservation organizations. So for example, tonight we have 2 speakers from WWF, and also Dr. Raghu has his organization. It's called Bhavan. And in fact, Dr. Raghu, if you don't mind, could you type in the web address for your organization? Somebody actually asked that question in the chat function. So if you could type in, for people how to find more information about Bhavan, that would be great.
We don't have a web right now, but we can send other details.
Okay. Then we'll share the details with our followers on our social media once you get it to us. And so along the same line, we at SWAG, we have created the Singapore Tiger Week fundraiser. And we created it because we decided to make Singapore Tiger Week free for everybody to attend. But of course, if you think we have done a good job and if you want to show your support, then we welcome any donations that you make to causes that we love. So for that, we have created a special global giving donation page, and it doesn't come to us. It actually goes directly to support the work of Wildlife Society of Selangor and my cat. And if you don't want to do that, if you prefer to support SWAG and our work in Singapore, then you can go to our web store and buy some of our swag. 100% of our proceeds go to programs that support wild cat conservation, including our own Love Our Leopard Cat campaign in Singapore And of course, through our volunteers and various supporting, I guess, programs that we would, throughout the year, we do help My Cat in Malaysia as well. So any amount, big or small, we do appreciate it. Thank you. And I'll hand it back to Vilma to see if, do you have anything else to add, Vilma?
Actually, no. We do have one more slide, but if we, okay. Yeah, just to say, join us tomorrow. We have Dr. Dale McKell, who will be talking about tiger conservation in Northeast Asia, saving the Siberian tigers, and bringing wild tigers back to Kazakhstan, opportunities and hopes by Mr. Gregory Mazmanians from WWF Central Asia. So please do join us tomorrow. And we also hope to play Kuenley's video on women in conservation. Other than that, thank you very much for joining us, and have a very good evening.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Bye.